all viewers of this webinar series called EduCampion. Maraming salamat po sa Rex Education sa imbitasyong makilahok sa programang ito. My name is Dina Ocampo from the UP College of Education, and I'm going to share with you on the importance of student agency. As teachers, we always want the best for our students, and we ask the question, how do we envision our students' futures? We always answer this question by bringing up our aspirations and wishes for them, such as happiness, kindness, and very Filipino values, such as respect for elders, honesty, kindness, and, of course, nationalism. Sometimes, however, we notice that our commitment to these aspirations are different from the commitment of the children themselves. And today, we will discuss a possible explanation why there are differences in those commitments. Student agency is an educational construct that is derived from the social cognitive theory proposed by Dr. Albert Bandura. He expounded on agency in his theory, and he said that our actions are propelled by three things: personal factors, environmental factors, and behavior. He also said that our actions are driven by goals, which are richly contextualized and socially situated and orchestrated within an environment. We need to understand agency in the context of schools and classrooms. Agency enables people to play a part in self-development, adaptation, self-renewal with the changing times. The word cloud on our screen shows the terms that are usually associated with agency. Among these are intention, planning, goals, actions, reflectiveness, motivation, and cognitions. Student agency, on the other hand, is thus defined as the capacity to set a goal, reflect, and act responsibly to effect change in one's own learning and development. Sometimes it's also called learner agency. In Filipino, I think the most appropriate term is kusa. Kusa sa pag-aaral, sa pagkatuto, at sa pagpapalago ng sarili. These are some prevailing definitions of agency. These are drawn from research by various organizations across the world. In summary, agency is about acting rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those that were determined by others. So the question that arises is, what can students apply their agency on? Here are some examples. I've identified 5 areas for us today. The first is on what they learn, such as the curriculum. They can identify together with their teachers goals for learning, curriculum content, what books or texts they want to read. Second would be how they will learn and how they will know if they are learning. Modalities of learning, for example, platforms to use, online, hybrid, books, and instructional materials to use. These are all important for this second area. Third, on when and where they want to learn. This is very important because, especially after the pandemic, our world has opened up to options that weren't available to us before because of policy. But now, we can adjust schedules, we can time assessments, and there is flexibility in assignments. Fourth area is with whom they want to learn. For example, students can have interest groups, clubs, and organizations to join, school and community activities to participate in. Number 4, I think we have been doing very well for many years. Number 5, on classroom and school policy. Students can apply student agency when they elect their student government, but usually it stops there. with student activities. We can pull that or push that a bit further by talking about how does the school manage its resources? Is it following green architecture, or is it following environmentally friendly waste management? These are things that students can weigh on. So here are examples of 10 ways to give students more control over their learning. One is to vary assessment. My favorite is to be able to personalize content and set goals. This means that one child may be learning more about classical texts such as Shakespeare, Wuthering Heights, while another student would be more interested in more recent literature or 20th century literature, 21st century literature, such as Harry Potter or other books such as Hunger Games. So these things are personalized content. Children can weigh in on those decisions as long as they fall within the scope of the curriculum. Developing agency is also both a goal and a process. We must ensure that we empower all learners, especially those who experience disadvantage in life. Studies have shown that the development of student agency is compromised or affected by socio-economic context of children. Children who come from poor backgrounds do not develop or have a harder time developing agency because they cannot see a future for themselves because they are poor. And so they just accept whatever education dishes out to them. And I think that is really the antithesis of student agency. Children should be able to imagine a future for themselves, and schools should allow them to do that. The other key indicator, or a key context of developing student agency is the concept of co-agency between the student, his or her peers, parents, teachers, and community. These relationships are important. On this slide, we show the degrees of co-agency that were developed by learners themselves in preparation for the Future of Education 2030 document of the OECD. The range starts from silence. Can you imagine that? Silence. Children do not have a say in any of the decisions made for them in school. Then it can move forward or a little bit better to tokenism. It means that students have some representation. For example, there is a student council or there is a class president. But these are representations that have very limited engagement with the classroom processes and the school. And then there is the more heightened level of co-agency where students are actually sharing in the decision-making processes with the teacher. And so this co-agency is very important to nurture because what we would like to see is not just engaged students. We also want to see students who are making decisions or directing themselves so that they can attain their personal goals. So, these are agents in training. So, to be able to push children to the level of student agency, they need to have fundamental skills first and foremost. Fundamental skills include literacy, numeracy, comprehension, content knowledge, among others. So the stronger their thinking or higher order thinking skills are, the more powerful they are and more likely to participate in agency. Second, another prerequisite is engagement. Students who are already applying themselves in schoolwork show motivation, interest, and abilities to work with others. So these two must combine so that a child can cross over to the level of student agency. In student agency, a student is not hindered. The student can use his or her voice to comment on whether learning topics are relevant or can be made more interesting. This is when students speak their minds and teachers listen. Choice is another aspect of agency, where students are helped by teachers to make good decisions. And finally, the third aspect of agency is when students participate in assessments of their progress, they take responsibility for the results and outcomes, and then they set new goals for themselves. These are not hierarchical. However, we have to stress that fundamental skills really help those children to push forward towards agency. In the beginning of this lecture, we started with the original formulation of Bandura, who cited personal, behavioral, and environmental factors. In 2021, Anderson adapted this by identifying 3 ingredients of learner agency that can be applied in schools. The first is the power to act, which is driven by personal and fundamental skills. The second is the will to act, which is underpinned by engagement, motivation, and of course, attitudes. And finally, is the provision of the environment in which to act, such as classrooms, where the student, together with teachers, school administrators, and peers, can exercise their learning agency. These are children who leave our schools at the end of elementary or high school. We asked the question in the beginning, how do we envision our students' future? Perhaps the true essential question should be, what should we be doing now so that our students can imagine and shape their futures? Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.
When you arrive in your respective classrooms, what do you usually observe among your pupils? What usually makes them busy? iGen or Gen Z students are busy with their gadgets, with their mobile applications, and are updated on social media. Some might find this concerning as this distracts them from their classwork. However, this situation might present a surprise opportunity for you to encourage their language and social-emotional development. In the language classrooms, teachers can utilize fun games to get and hold the attention of the lower primary grades and make them engage with their lessons. Research says the use of fun games in teaching may increase students' participation and willingness to take risks in using the English language. Aside from giving teachers a fun way to help students develop their communication skills, games can also assist in developing social and emotional learning among pupils, an important element in student agency. Let's take, for example, the use of the word game hangman, where the first player thinks of a word and the second player guesses it before they get hung. The teacher might limit the words to a particular topic to make guessing the word possible. By making the pupils talk and discuss, they develop their communication skills while having fun. The cooperative aspect of the game makes students interact and collaborate, allowing them to be comfortable with each other, open and expressive. The collaborative element practices students to value others, be careful in their language, and be sensitive to others' needs. This leads to co-agency, which is defined as interactive, mutually supportive relationship with people around them to help students achieve their shared goals. Teacher must remember though that for games to be support social emotional development, they need to be well planned and integrated only when they are relevant to the learning objectives. So what are you waiting for? have some fun with their students through games that foster social, emotional, and language development. Ito ang galaw idukampiyon ko. Ano ang sayo? We all want our students, even at a very young age, to be fully equipped with the skills needed to be independent, critical, and lifelong learners. However, the big question is, how do we do this? How do we help our students become active in the learning process and take ownership of their learning? The challenge may be big, but one way to achieve this is by fostering students' agency in our classroom. To encourage student agency, one practice that we can employ in our classroom is giving students a voice. Voice refers to students' ability to shape and create their own learning. Giving them a voice means we allow learners to share ideas, designs, their output or project, set objectives, monitor their own learning, facilitate a discussion, and set presentation targets. For example, for grades 4 to 6, we may begin our classes with a welcome activity, where students share a piece of breaking news or what's on their minds. Our students might be filled with worries or preoccupied with schoolwork. Through this welcome activity, they can release their thoughts, clear their minds, and be ready for the day. Initially, sharing can be done in small groups, but this can eventually be done in front of the class as they get more comfortable with sharing their thoughts with other people. This activity would also strengthen the relationship among students and serve as a springboard to the lesson of the day, if what they shared is connected to the topic. The activity is also a meaningful practice that helps develop their communicative competence. By giving students a voice, we allow them to both shape and influence their learning and to develop their communication skills. A classroom is a place where students gain knowledge and skills, but this should also be a place where they discover their voice. Giving students a voice strengthens their engagement and deepens their experience, leading towards a meaningful language learning. Ito ang galaw idukampiyon ko. Ano ang sayo?
Give students a choice and a voice. This is the main ingredient of fostering student agency in the classroom. But how do we do it in teaching writing? When students write, they undergo the process of pre-writing, drafting, revising and editing before publishing. Somewhere along the revising and editing stage, we teachers play an important role. After the draft is written, we mark our students' papers and give them feedback, which is usually based on the assessment criteria we have set. This stage, however, can facilitate student agency if we let the students take control of the feedback they will get from us. Instead of giving them feedback on their output's content, organization, grammar, and mechanics, why don't we let them tell us what particular aspects of their writing they want to hear feedback on? Allowing students to tell us what they need from us empowers them to take control. It gives them a choice on what and how they want to learn. After all, students know their strengths and weaknesses. What they need to know from us are the steps they need to take to improve their writing skill. We can also foster student agency in feedback giving by promoting uptake or learner responses to feedback. This means that we need to allow our learners to make use of or respond to our feedback. For example, instead of deliberately correcting mistakes in parallelism, we might ask a student, how can this sentence have parallel structure? By making them fix their mistakes, they get more involved in their learning process. We can also give feedback on the processes the students use to complete the task and on their ability to self-regulate their own learning. When teachers provide appropriate levels of challenge and support, learners take increasing responsibility for their own learning. This makes learners not only more engaged, but also more excited to receive feedback. Feedback that is not just focused on spotting errors, but on how students can further improve their writing skill. Ito ang galawang edukampyon ko. Anong sayo? Have you ever wondered why you only get a few hands during a class discussion? The answer might be due to intimidation. Sometimes, no matter how much we emphasize that participating in class is more important than giving the correct answer, students still keep their answers to themselves. This is where collaborative group activities come in handy. Grouping students together and allowing them to discuss a topic provide more opportunities to increase student agency. Expressing thoughts in a small group allows students to have an active role in their learning, as this kind of environment offers a supportive atmosphere. Here, students do not have to overly worry about being wrong. For example, instead of teaching Shakespeare's Sonnet 116 line by line, provide the small groups a set of questions they have to discuss to deconstruct the poem. When students share their ideas, they take ownership of their own analysis. Instead of asking the class what Shakespeare wants to convey in sonnet and calling just one or two students to share their answers, make all your students discuss their thoughts. To further foster student agency in collaborative group work, empower students to choose how they want to demonstrate their learning. Whether it's through a poster presentation, a skit, or a song, give them a choice on how they want to show the product of their collaborative effort. Allowing the learners to integrate their passion in their learning makes them more eager to delve into the topic. Just a side note, grading the students' creative presentation should not be our focus. What we need to measure is if they understood the topic and the task, regardless of their chosen mode of presentation. While it's always good to think of ways on how we can surprise our students, we should also allow them to surprise us. When we teach students to be empowered, problem solvers, and collaborators, we produce responsible and lifelong learners. What shall I teach my students today? What will my students show me today? Hopefully, is the second question we get to ask ourselves from now on. Ito ang galawang edukampyon ko. Anong sayo?
Our senior high school students are at a point when the idea of independence is strong. Student agency, therefore, becomes a must. What can we do to assist our students? How do we make sure that our students appreciate, learn, and take ownership of their learnings? Student agency in learning could be achieved through the use of authentic project-based activities that are meaningful and relevant to learners, driven by their interest, and often initiated with appropriate guidance from teachers. Authentic project-based learning provides opportunities to increase student agency. To do such activities, we need to carefully plan by first looking at the needs of our learners, after which we design an appropriate project-based activity that is within the scope of their interest and will respond to the identified needs. It is important that we apply the principles of differentiated instruction as well as tiered learning when needed. A concrete example of project-based learning promoting students' agency would be service learning by adopting a lot for reading garden. In this project, the students will use different skills. They will employ their negotiation skills during planning and creation of their proposal or concept paper, their communication skills when writing letters to stakeholders to seek their support and when presenting their concept paper, and their mathematical skills in budgeting and estimating the cost of services to be rendered.
This project is engaging and meaningful to students because they have to take in part in its creation and ownership of the process as well as the output. This empowers students and makes them realize that their concerted efforts, knowledge, skills, and attitudes can create things that will help themselves and others by transforming what they value into tangible outcomes that contribute to the betterment of their community. Ito ang edukampiyon ko. Ano ang sayo?
I'm Audrey B. Moralio, an assistant professor at the College of Education, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Student agency is rooted in the belief that students have the capacity to positively influence their lives and the world around them. According to OECD, student agency is the capacity to set a goal, reflect, and act responsibly to effect change. It is also about making decisions and choices rather than accepting those made by others. In this series of videos on applying student agency in the English classroom, teachers have been offered with a number of concrete steps that they can take to help students take responsibility for their own learning. In the first video in this series, Teacher Wela discusses the use of fun games among key Stage 1 pupils for their socio-emotional development. Socio-emotional development is important in promoting student agency since this results in what we call co-agency, which is defined as interactive, mutually supportive relationships with people to help students achieve their shared goals. Through fun games, according to Teacher Wela, the communication skills of students can be developed. On top of that, the collaborative element of these games will allow learners to be comfortable with each other, open and expressive. It will also make them careful with their language and sensitive to others' needs to help maintain the relationship. Teacher must remember though, according to Teacher Wela, that for games to help in the language and socio-emotional development of students, they have to be well-planned and integrated carefully in our lessons. Ways to encourage students to develop their voice is the focus of Teacher Wela's second video. In it, she emphasizes that giving students a voice in the language classroom is an effective way to develop student agency. Voice refers to students' ability to shape and create their own learning. And giving them voice means allowing them to share their ideas, design their output or project, set objectives, monitor their learning, facilitate a discussion, and set presentation targets. For example, in grades 4 to 6, she recommends having a welcome activity where students will be made to share their thoughts on current events or even just what is on their mind. This can be done in small groups or as a class. Aside from strengthening student relationships, this can also serve as a springboard for class discussion for the day. This is also a good opportunity to make students use language in meaningful exchanges. Another area where student agency can be encouraged is feedbacking. According to Teacher Karen, teachers can foster student agency in feedback giving in writing by allowing students to take control of the feedback that they will receive. Instead of giving comments on the content, grammar, organization, mechanics of written outputs, students can be empowered to identify the aspects of their writing they would like to receive feedback on. This empowers them to be active participants in the process and to take control of their learning. Uptake can also be encouraged to promote student agency. To encourage uptake from feedback, teachers should give students with a chance to respond to or make use of the given feedback. By promoting student agency in feedbacking, learners become more engaged and excited to receive comments. Comments that are meant not to spot errors, but rather meant to aid students improve their writing. To promote student agency and engagement in high school class discussions, Teacher Karen urges teachers to make use of collaborative group work. For instance, students can be made to discuss literary pieces through teachers' guide questions. This helps students to take ownership of their analysis and allows them to experience deep and meaningful learning. Teacher Karen also advocates empowering students to choose how they want to demonstrate their learning, an integral idea in differentiated instruction. Hence, instead of asking all students to report, some may do a poster presentation while others may do a skit or sing a song. There are many ways to foster student agency. What is important, according to Teacher Karen, is for teachers to allow themselves to be surprised by empowered and guided students. One important plank of student agency is enabling students to positively influence their own lives as well as the world around them. And this is an area where Teacher Mitch's authentic project-based learning can help language teachers. In Teacher Mitch's video, she underscores the fact that senior high school students have a strong sense of independence, which necessitates the development of their student agency. How can this be done at this level? Teacher Mitch suggests the use of authentic, meaningful, and relevant project-based activities where students use their various skills. For example, they can be made to engage in service learning by adopting a lot for a reading garden. In this activity, students will need to use their various skills such as negotiation, communication, and even mathematical skills to be successful. Aside from empowering students, they will also be given a chance to see how their concerted efforts can lead to the betterment of their communities. The videos on applying student agency in English classes demonstrates the centrality of empowering students to set goals, to reflect, and to effect change. These recommended activities emphasize that students are active agents in their learning and not simply vessels waiting to be filled up with knowledge from their teachers. What teachers need to develop is the foundational skills that students will need to exercise their agency and to make responsible decisions and choices for their own learning. Ito ang galawang edukampiyon ko. Ano ang sayo?